Welcome to Diving Deeper's discussion. I'm your host, Randy Isaac. I'm here on behalf of the American Scientific Affiliation, and in this forum, we have discussions usually of articles and book reviews published in our journal, Perspectives on Science and Christian Faith. And for last month, this month, and next month, special focus and attention on the ASA 2023 annual meeting, which this year was held at University of Toronto in the Mississauga campus last weekend in July. And we are very privileged this afternoon to have as our guest one of the plenary speakers, which is Joanna Ng, and her topic. I'll use a shortened topic. It was such a long one, wasn't it, Joanna? AI in the next gen digital infrastructure. That was a more readable title over here that you offered to us. I would say that a longer introduction and the abstract are there at the beginning of the lecture, but we'll take a little bit of time to get to know her first. So welcome to the program, Joanna.
Thank you. My honor.
All right. So now many of us heard you already and know a little bit about you, but there will be others listening who are not able to attend the meeting. So let's just take a little bit of time to get to know you. I know you said you were Canadian, but does that mean you were born in Canada?
No. I was born in Hong Kong, and then I left Hong Kong after high school to come here and stay
Why
here.
Did you leave?
Why did I leave? A little bit of a rebellious, because my mom put me in an all-girls school from junior kindergarten, and we had the same class of students that we knew each other since we were 3 years old and graduated high school together. So life was a little bit boring. So I wanted to find a place that my mom couldn't control me. But anyway, she did still, but she found a way. So that was
Mothers have a way of doing that, don't they?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Okay, so where did you go? You left Hong Kong, and did you go to Canada then?
Yeah. So I went to U of Calgary. I could have other city to choose from, Toronto or Vancouver, but Calgary was the one of the city that my mom didn't have friends there. So
that was a good one. You have a method to your madness there, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's great.
A pretty big cultural shock coming from such a protective environment of an all-girls school with the same 40 people in the class, and then jump all the way into the dorm, which was the hardest year of transition in my life.
Yes, I'll bet. Now, which school did you go to there then? Which school?
In Hong Kong or in
Calgary? In Calgary.
U of Calgary.
Oh, U of Calgary. Okay.
Yeah.
And you got your undergraduate degree there then?
Yes, I got my undergraduate degree there.
In what?
Okay, so that was a story, because I think one of the questions you asked, how did I end up in tech?
Right.
Okay, so a short story was I think ever since I was in grade 8, I was very, very intrigued by psychology. So I read all the books about psychology, and I had a one-track mind to study psychology. And so in U of Calgary, the first year was general studies, so we don't have to declare major. But I register all my, critical courses in psychology, and fully expected to declare my major in psychology in second year, because at least to me at that point in time, it was my childhood dream becoming true. So I became
true. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I became a Christian first year in university, which is another story that I'll tell in a time.
Right.
And after, because I became a Christian, God intervened. So when I filled in my form in the last term of first year, because everyone had to slot it into a major in second year. To me, it was a no-brainer. The declaration of major is psychology. So I almost handed in the form, but with unexplainable reason, I had no peace, no joy. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep after I filled in the form. So as a new Christian, I knew enough that there was no outside factor. My parents were on board. This was my one-track mind. I had no plan B. So I knew it was from the Lord. So I asked him, obviously, this is from you. And so what do you want? Right? And so I was kicking and screaming, and then I surrendered. I said, okay, if you say no, then you have to at least tell me what you want me to do, because I don't even know what to fill in. And the form was due in a couple of days. And then once I surrendered my right to choose, the Holy Spirit kind of spoke to me in a very strong way. And then all of a sudden my eyes were open. In first year, I registered late. So all the optional courses where French took French, Chinese took Chinese, trying to put up the GPA, all those classes were gone. So I took C, Basic, C++. It sounds easy. So I treated them like bird courses, like, good courses. You just spend a little time and get pretty good mark, which is exactly what I did. I spent very little time and got very good mark. And then, like, at that moment, the Lord was saying, "Are you blind? You spend so little effort. Have you not noticed your classmate spend way more time and couldn't get the marks you get?" And then once I filled in computer science, there was this supernatural peace from head to toe that was, I couldn't explain it, but inner peace told me I've done the right thing. And then the rest is history, because ever since then, doors were open. Like once I graduated, I worked for IBM. They put me as one of the first 5 compiler writer. I went to Yorktown every month to transfer the LALR parser back to Toronto and productized it. Got to work with very, very deep, complex program in compilers that they forgot I was just a rookie. Yeah. So then doors were open, and then more doors were open, and then the rest was history.
Okay, so that's how wow. That's a great summary over there. So the only university you went to was Calgary then, right? Or did you go on anywhere else?
No, at part-time, I went to got an MBA from U of Queens.
Oh, I see. So you got your MBA as well. It's a good combination then. Okay. Yeah,
well, it's very humbling. I choose to do that because, well, I mean, you came from IBM, like,
right? Yeah, it's great to have fellow ex-IBMers here. We need.
I
this
know,
is good.
Right?
Yeah.
In IBM, your token of brownie point was if you file a patent, you got a paper published, right. Innovation, you are king and queen, right? Then the business people say, "How are you gonna make money out of this?" And it's like, who cares? Those marketing folks will bring in the money.
Marketing for it. So IBM was the first company you worked for then?
I initially worked for Honeywell for a few months.
Oh, I see.
And then I wanted to pivot because my cup of tea is software. And in Honeywell, for the few months, I was the only software engineer there. It was basically a hardware engineer. So a few months there, my job was to burn EEPROM with graphics software in their chip that they could put into the PAC system. Mm-hmm. But I knew my field is software. And so I knew I couldn't grow being the only software engineer there. So that's pivot to IBM very quickly after working a few months there.
That's great. Yeah. So you were stationed. You stayed in Canada then, or
yes?
Which location were you in IBM?
I was in. Initially it was called 1150, which eventually moved to Markham, which is software lab of Toronto. Right. And there were many attempts to move me down in Soma.
Good old Somers.
Yeah. There were a couple of attempts to move me to Soma, to Japan. But I wanted to do my career, which I love very much, without compromising my family. So Like there was one time I was offered a job to be a technologist strategist for Steve Mills, and I tried to make it work for part-time. Oh no, I mean remotely. And they say no. Steve Mills wanted you next to his office, and said,
okay.
So I did walk away from a few career enhancing opportunity that people call career. So
okay, all right. So we want to get to your talk very quickly, but let's. Where's the transition then? Then was what did you say? After 10 years, you left IBM and started your own company. Is that what I understand?
I actually was there for 30 years.
30? Okay. Yeah. You're not old enough for that. There's something wrong here.
Yeah. So 30 years, and then I left IBM. But
wow.
The departure was an interesting one because I think I mentioned briefly to you. I'm not on board with where Watson is going, so I couldn't convince them to do augmented cognition because IBM is not into personal services. So I'm still working on these kind of projects. So this is not, it's quite personal for me.
Interesting. So you left IBM to start your own company. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And how long has that been now?
I took a year off. So really working on my company for about 3 years.
Okay. And that's great. And what is the key focus of the company?
Okay, so I'm working on something called Axiom AI, which I lay low. The reason why I took a year off and kind of lay low because I need to version off my brain. Last year, I filed 4 patents with Grady Bush that is related in the field. So I need to do some very drastic separation of that version of me away from that, so that now I can prove to the world that, like, if anything progressing in my Axiom AI, which I can't talk much about, then it is truly Joanna on her own, not Joanna's legacy from IBM.
Right.
Right. And that's the kind of. So.
Okay, so let's move on to the topic of our lecture. Just a quick, is this just a composite of what you've learned of your career, or how did you come to focus on this particular topic on AI?
Okay, so my journey on AI started when I was asked to head up an organization in Toronto called the Center for Advanced Study, which is a research unit in IBM Canada to work with all the professors in Canada from computer science to do collaborative research with the professors in computer science. And so in the talk, I talk about working on a project using a veteran database that was part of that initiative. So the Toronto group has worked on various kinds of research projects, like the NYPD data with SPSS, was part of that research before Watson was really becoming hot. And so, so it's been like the last 10, 15 years in working on various aspects of in AI.
Okay, that's great. Well, it was really a very comprehensive assessment of what AI is and what the issues are. So really appreciate your taking the time to share this with us. So why don't we move on then into our discussion phase, and Vicki, if you would enable people in the audience to unmute themselves, we'll do that. I would still like to ask all of you, stay on mute until I call on you and give you permission to talk. We will start as usual with those who submitted questions in advance. And also, as usual, or as at least very often, the first person to submit a question was Del Kuhn. So, Del, it's good to see you here again. And Del, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, Randy, thanks. And Joanna, I really appreciated your lecture and its scope and how well you integrated faith along with the AI. I focus my question on the military, but I think it's a general question. Military is just good because it's a large-scale thing that has more or less drastic effects. And I'm not coming from an expert position on it, so don't assume I know anything because I don't. But my understanding is large language models, because of the basic algorithms and the architecture of them, is something that we can't go back into and understand how the model came to the specific answer it came to. And it's not a matter of the data set it trains on, but it's simply a matter of this is the way the algorithm, this is the way the math or whatever works. And at the same time, models that we've taught how to play games, and I'm thinking of AlphaGo in particular, the grandmasters then say that these machines don't play like a human being plays. So I'm putting those two together, and I'm saying that, again, generally for any application, but specifically for military, are we getting in over our heads by using something for decision support that we don't understand how it works, and we know it doesn't play a game like a human, especially when we maybe have adversaries that are using their comparable AI to come up with, possible moves they can make, but they're playing different games with different rules. Mm-hmm. So how should we be looking at AI for helping us with our decisions? And is this a point where maybe we've outrun our ability to control or to handle the morals of what we've created?
Okay. So
I'm hoping you allay my fears.
I don't.
Hey, I was afraid of that.
Yeah. Okay, so let me say this. I think the devil is in the details. So if you remember, there was a chart that I talked about the landscape of the various technologies of AI. Large language model is just a very small portion in the symbolic AI. There is a symbolic AI and there's other things. So let's put LLM in its place. So large language model is used for generating content. And it's done by taking the massive sources of document, tokenize them, and then discover the pattern and the relationship of sequence of words so that you can generate output based on that statistical association of word sequence to create presentable content. So I'm just summarizing in a very, very broad stroke. So if we know a large language model is a model to use for generating content, then it is not a one size fits all, right? So let me point out some design flaw in LLM today that is, I think, generally agreed upon. The first thing is the first flaw of LLM design in GPT, the generative pre-trained transformer, is that it treated all sources as equal, right? Whether it is a post by Trump or whether it's a post by Biden or whether it is a post by somebody else, it's treated it as equal. And that is a major design flaw, because if Trump or Biden wrote a blog about, COVID, COVID-19, then it is very different from someone who is an epidemiologist with the decade of experience to write a peer review paper on COVID-19 as an article. So the two shouldn't be treated the same. And so this is one major flaw. The other major design flaw is that it doesn't communicate in the results the confidence level, right? Like even if it is only 15% sure this is right, it would say it without distinguishing from another output that I know 99% it would be right, right? So those are the major design flaw. And LLM is not ready, to my opinion, for clinical applications yet because of these flaws, right? Because if you apply LLM into medical, you can't use it clinically yet because life is in concern, right? Now, comparatively, like, Randy introduced me, I came from IBM. In Deep QA, which is another technology for question and answer, Deep QA is the technology behind Watson. It did things very differently. Deep QA did not decompose sources into tokens. It keep the sources intact. And it has technology to analyze the question, to generate multiple hypotheses, and then have a way to find evidence from the original source to answer a question. So in Jeopardy, when Watson answered Toronto is a part of Chicago, his confidence level was like 15%, right? So versus say it as if it was, the fact. And now, of course, Deep QA has its own limitation, but all these is saying that I don't think that LLM right now, as is ready for serious application other than some cool ChatGPT that did no harm, right? There was a paper about using it in medical field, and it's absolutely not yet, trustworthy enough because you cannot just tokenize all your sources and based on token association to predict the outcome without evidently being confident or at least know how confident you are in your answer. So that's a one short answer to that. And keeping perspective that LLM is for generative content. It might not be necessarily good for evidence-based decision-making type of AI, which is totally something else. So I'll give you another data point. The Scientific American published a journal in March this year that talk about how the Go player and the chess player become smarter because they lost to AlphaGo and they lost to IBM Deep Blue. Okay, now, and then the article concluded that the AI computational power plays a big part of the AI engine winning these games, right? Because with computation power, it can analyze millions of positions per second, which human cannot do. And it would allow the player to explore vast number of possible moves and the consequence of each move in a very deep traversal to know if this is a good move, if the current move is a good move, right? And it also has the computation power to anticipate component responses, which human mind cannot do. And because it's a machine, it never get tired, it never get nervous, that affect performance, and it's always at its peak performance, and that's why they win. However, the University of Hong Kong in the City University, they compile a database of each move in the Go game and in the chess game, and collected 5.8 million moves of this game, and then have an analysis of a rate of quality or the quality index when each move is made. So when the chess player is assisted by these kind of, evidence-based decision making, they play much better. So this journal, this Scientific American Journal, concluded that maybe we shouldn't make AI our competitor. Maybe men should make AI an ally, right? And I hear you about the LLM, but there are other statistical analysis that are more accurate, that would be good to use for evidence-based decision. Now, in terms of the military side, now it is, so the example I'm quoting is unrelated to AI, but I think you've heard 60 years ago, there's this Russian submarine officer, Apatov, who in human form received all kinds of input that the US Marine was, doing all kinds of moves that make them believe that they are going to sink the Russian submarine, and that because even though US has communicated to Moscow that they are not going to attack, but trying to force the submarine to submerge, but because so happened that this submarine was detached from Moscow, they were pre-authorized to launch the nuclear bomb that was on their submarine. And they need 3 people to authorize that. And it was the wisdom of this guy, Arkhipov, that refused to agree while the other 2 agreed that we are not in the post-era of nuclear bomb. Now, this is not an AI example, but all I'm saying is that in these kind of decisions, it just goes to show how much AI need human wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very good. Can you follow on there, Del? Is that okay? No, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay, yeah. Pretty much so. I think we're always going to hope that there's somebody smart enough to override whatever the advisors tell them. I guess
Right.
my worry is not Hal in 2001. It's that particular moves are going to look like the opening moves in somebody's corresponding AlphaGo game for the military. And but if I could kind of maybe rephrase from my simplified understanding of something you're saying about AlphaGo, is that why it's winning is that humans maybe can look ahead maybe 6 or 10 moves, and AlphaGo is looking down maybe 60 or 100. So it really is a number crunching computer power, right, more than a potentially different mode of analysis.
Right. So okay. I will conclude this answer to your question by saying this. We cannot deny the advantage of AI's computational power, right? Because it would traverse broadly, exhaustively, all the possible permutation that human brain cannot do, right? And it will anticipate, move, and it will overcome a lot of human limitation, okay? So we cannot deny that. But on the other hand, we cannot make machine responsible for things. We should make the human to use the machine without checking. The human who authorized that should be responsible for this. And this I cannot understate enough. Like I think we all know that, like, if you have a delegate in your organization and that person act on your behalf, if that person screw up, you are still responsible. And I think AI should be exactly the same in that, so right at this moment, we have a lot of interesting discussion. For example, when driverless car become an everyday thing, when it kills somebody, who is responsible? That is a big discussion in auto insurance industry right now, right? But at the end of the day, it is the company who choose to put their invention in the hands of user that should be responsible for what happened, and not blame the driverless car to be responsible, which leads to no one is responsible. I think same as for military decision, like what you choose to automate that you don't check again by human is a human decision. So you can't blame AI. It's how human should be made liable to use AI, and we can never get away with that liability. We shouldn't, especially for technology company who release AI solutions in various forms into the hands of user. These technology company who choose to profit from releasing the technology to human should be made responsible. That include exhaustively testing all the possible permutation before you put it in the hands of the product, which is not happening right now for no good reason, right? Like, why on earth could we let something like ChatGPT happen? Like, I look at Randy, I feel, okay, there's an echo there, because I remember the days when IBM released a product, I and the other executives have to sit down with a lawyer, and the lawyer would list out the claims that we can warranty and list out the users that we are not responsible for before we release a product in the hands of the user, right? So I don't think we should treat AI any differently. And that's why I keep saying the ChatGPT released this untested with no liability because they call themselves beta. So why should we even let that happen?
Right. Okay. Very good. Thank you so much. All right. We move on to our second questioner, which is John Wood. And I think you've got a little more concise version of what you sent, right?
Joanna, this is such a fascinating conversation, and it has so many different threads. Thank you for framing it the way you have, and especially this Dell's question, which I think is related to what I'm trying to get at here too. I just would make a point on your last comment there. You talked about, I thought about your MBA background when you said that you shouldn't make AI responsible, you should hold people responsible behind it. But corporations, our courts have held that corporations are like persons. They have this limited liability and other things under the law. And we're over in the environmental area saying, well, hey, wait a minute, there are people behind those corporations that are actually making the decisions. But the courts have held that those are actually separate. So it's the corporation, not the people responsible. And so my mind goes right to that. And you're thinking about this question on AI. So my short version, though, is that's a segue to my short version.
You made it long.
Thanks, Randy.
All right.
Caught me.
Go ahead.
Johnny, you said something in your talk. You said, if AI is the answer, what is the question? And then you helpfully turned to the Turing test, and you said that Turing test sets up a question for interrogating AI of man versus machine dichotomy. So I wanted to, what's the better question? I think your better question was something about, the humans in the form of the Bible, but that doesn't seem to work for non-Christian audience. I'm just wondering, what's that better question than the Turing question? What would be the better one you're thinking about?
Okay. So Christians or not, we are all made in the image of God. Even non-Christians are made in the image of God. So there are some commonality there. I think AI for good is a common theme that everyone understood. So maybe a better question is, with how can we leverage machine power to make better lives of people and to make the world a better place? And AI for sure can help with that. And I don't think the algorithm changed, but there is a bit more focus to tune how we apply our resources. So because of the Turing question, can machine think? Then automatically we only think of AI as artificial narrow intelligence, which is, humans still smarter than man, and aspire to be the first of artificial general intelligence, which is to prove that machine is equivalent to man, which is why everyone rushed to be the first in what we experience in ChatGPT and BART and, in Bing and, because everyone wanted to be, I'm the first to be the first AGI. And it doesn't stop there, right? Because still people want to aspire to be the super intelligence, which is like, that's why because the last job I took from IBM was the strategist for Watson IoT, which is how can we make Watson smarter when I put IoT device to digitize and instrument the different environment around the world, right? So it's that, like, because the question was asked, can machine think? It automatically set up these 3 stages of, ANI, AGI, and ASI, which send us to a totally different trajectory. And so that's why I'm like, is there what we call the augmentation factor test, like A+ test in the augmented cognitive science field? We call the augmentation factor the A+ test. So for example, I use the same example I used before. When the chess player and the Go player allied with AI, how much better can they play chess that were different from, or the A+ factor that had they not used machine computation to play chess? And that's something worth measuring. And then there's a lot of good to be done with that, right? Like whether it is the environmental improvement of a better planet, or whether, like, because I talked about the main advantage of the computational power is that it can, process a lot of data accurately at the same time, but also look at all the possible permutation that human couldn't, and it is good at detecting patterns that we often miss, right? And so that apply a lot to data, right? And one of the projects I remember working with the professor was what we call the personal medicine. And I can't say the project was successful, but because we don't have enough data, but given time, it will get there, which was we collect all the different kind of cancer drugs. And then we collect parameters such as your age group, the size of the tumor, your ethnic profile. And then eventually there will be a pattern and say, if you're this age and your tumor size is this, and if you are Chinese descent, then the most effective cancer drug for this particular cancer is A, not B. And that's something that no human can do right now that can do a lot of good, right? And so in US, I remember working with a professor in U of Maryland. We don't have enough data because in US to have your genome profile done costs $2,000. So if everyone had, like, let's say, like, if we dream of the day that your US government pay for everyone to have your genome profile done, and then we track every drug and we track the longevity of the disease, then this kind of pattern would be beneficial, right? And right now, all the oncologists just like randomly pick a drug that is most marketed and say, oh, you have cancer X, and therefore this is the drug with no evidence, right? So there's a lot more that we can do in evidence-based decision, whether it is from investment data point of view, or from health data point of view, or from an environmental data point of view, that could make lives better and that could make the world better. And that's why I keep saying, if AI is the answer, we need to ask a better question. And I don't think can machine think is a good question. Can machine think just say, I can do it and therefore I do it, and I don't care what is the problem that I'm solving, which is how typical technologists think. And I used to think that way until you realize, we cannot be let loose, right? If you look at the Oppenheimer movie is on, I just watch it, you cannot wash away from the responsibility of what you're working on, right?
So if I may make a follow-on on that one, because John brought up the Turing test here, and I agree with you. It's a very good point that it sets up competition rather than cooperation. But that being said, the Turing test is still an interesting one to ferret out certain characteristics. And isn't it clear that so far, at least, the AI systems are not able to pass the Turing test? Or do some people consider that it has?
It's passed the Turing test on certain deep domain, but not general.
Right, because it seems to me that what, and I really liked your slides where you talked about explainability.
Yes.
And one of the things, if you're doing the Turing test, is to ask the AI systems to explain, to provide the reference, to breathe it, and it will fail miserably. And I think you could see it that way.
Right. And also the fact that it really that cannot or incapable of doing causal analysis. Right. Which is a big, you cannot say you reach AGI without that, right? But also human uniquely are able to generalize knowledge to other domains.
Right.
We can, let's say, for example, like if I observe traversing a graph can solve a problem, then Mark Zuckerberg knows the graph and create Facebook, right? Right? One finite state machine that seems so useless, but it's so many problems using finite state machines. So the generalization of knowledge into a totally different unrelated problem domain is uniquely human. And that's despite the victory of machine to win the Go game, to win the chess game, to win Jeopardy, it doesn't make it smarter because it doesn't do anything outside of the.
Yeah, so I really like your focus over on emphasizing the cooperation of human and AI instead of the competition. And so Turing test has some abilities to ferret out the differences as well as the advantages that humans still have. Okay, so those are the submitted questions. Going to open it up now, and as usual, please go to the icon at the bottom called reaction. Maybe you have to go on the three dots there and get the more. It's in there. Raise your hand, and I will call on you in the order in which you raise your hand. And the first person to have done so is Paul Carr. It was good to see you at the meeting, Paul. And to go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, I think we all like your idea that divine wisdom is greater than AI as a teacher. However, after reading some of Randy's thought that we all know that knowledge is better than information and wisdom is better than knowledge. But how do we get this divine knowledge? Now, traditionally, people would say, oh, we get it from the Bible. But we all know that particularly scientists know that the science, the cosmology in the Bible is totally out of date. It's flat earth cosmology. We also know that the anthropology, what we've learned about the history of and origins of humans, is much greater than the people who wrote the Bible. So how do we get this divine wisdom? Traditionally, it's from the Bible, but I'm sorry, for scientists, anthropologists, that isn't true.
Okay. Someone asked me, how do I get the T-shirt? Send me an email, and I'm asking okay, so I'm not getting into selling T-shirt business, but my friend is. So send me an email. So when she set it all up, I'll forward it to you. Okay. So before I answer your question, someone online say, how can I get the T-shirt? Okay, so let me explain why I make the T-shirt. Okay, and then I'll answer your question. Okay, the reason why I make this T-shirt is that I find out with my IBM colleagues, talking about AI is a great way to talk about the gospel. Because when we say, do you agree with Stephen Hawking that man is like a machine? While they professionally say yes, because that's how you justify ASI, when you come to a personal level, they all say, no, I'm better than that. And then it gets you into asking, who are you? What is your purpose in life? Why are you here? Right? So that's one point. And another thing then is that it's a good conversation to debunk some of the deception that AI is, and to set a good example, that the work of our hands in AI points to God. So that's why I make the T-shirt, because it is such a moment at this time that we can use AI to talk about the gospel without people feeling offensive. And I tried that, and I tried it actually with my IBM colleague, and it actually worked quite well. So that's that. And so if you want a T-shirt, send me an email. When it's ready, I'll tell you. Okay. Second, to answer your question, how do we get DW? In Jeremiah 33:3, God gave a promise that if you ask me a question, I will answer you. Now, okay, so I'm not going to get into the different denominations because I'll get myself into trouble. I grew up Baptist, but I'm no longer Baptist, so let's not get there. But let me tell you my personal experience. One of my resume said that I have 49 patents claimed granted to my name. And a lot of times this came from this kind of divine connection and communication. Like if you look at Daniel, right, who had a horrible boss, Nebuchadnezzar, and said, Nebuchadnezzar, his boss, say, oh, I have a dream, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. But you have to interpret for me or I'll fire you. But worse than that, I'll kill you, right? And so there is a communication through the Holy Spirit because we are born again Christian. If you remember the diagram in my presentation, there is a link of our spirit to God's spirit. And Jesus in John 15 say, I'm no longer physically in the earth, but I leave you with a spirit so that through this spirit, you can get to know me, right? And it is that link that we get divine wisdom. And when we pray, we get those divine wisdom. So my testimony is not to brag about my 49 patterns. My testimony is quite a lot of those patterns truly come from mixing in prayer and work without distinguishing them. And then one time I was talking to my IBM patent lawyer who was kind of dedicated to serve me because I was so productive because of this mode of working. Then one time I just couldn't just naturally say, well, I think, we missed out God as a co-inventor. And then he laughed and then he said, oh, I'm a Christian too. I said, oh, so you know what I'm talking about. So divine wisdom comes from hearing from the Holy Spirit because Jesus saying, my sheep hear my voice. And it has demonstrated over and over and over and over again in various characters in the Bible. So that's my personal experience. And so I I know I have various engagement of discussion on different theology about, can you really hear from God? And here's my answer. For me, my answer is like that guy. I was blind, but now I see. This is what I experienced. And I can't explain the theology, but this is what I experienced. That's kind of my answer. And an invitation for you to try. Oh, you mute.
Okay. All right, he's off. Paul, are you responding?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good answer. That's the idea of the divine spirit then is connected to our spirit. The idea that's right. I like that. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
But it's not the main point is it's not a literal interpretation of the Bible. That was the sort of the point that I wanted to make.
No.
The action of the Holy Spirit with humans, and the interface between that our spirit is maybe a subset of the divine spirit and the
right. Now you know how I knew. So okay, so I'll share with you some of my experience. So in some when I was working on, let's say, the last 4 patents I did was with Grady Bush, working on AI knowledge representation, right? And so as I was working through the problem, every discipline has a frame of mind, right? So you work a bit, pray a bit, ask the Lord to bless the work of your hand, and then voila, like in your mind, there was a foreign idea that was outside of your domain knowledge. Then you were like, oh, okay. I knew it wasn't from me because it was so foreign, right? And then when you kind of dig deeper and follow through, it's like, oh, it actually works, right? So, I don't take credit for it. Like, Daniel didn't take credit when Nebuchadnezzar, his boss, praised him that, oh, you are such an amazing person to be able to figure all this out. And Daniel immediately said, I didn't do it because, my God gave this idea to me. So it actually worked, right? And I'm not getting myself into theology, but that's how I experienced it. Now, the reason why I slotted it in AI is that AI today in the world is causing a lot of deception, fear, and negativity. And from the fruit, we know this is not pleasing in God's eyes. And therefore, for those of us who know the Lord, we this. That's why I kept saying this is the moment that we should do something. First of all, we need to call out this deception, and we should also model to show something different, right? And which is why I'm playing around with something called Axiom AI, which is a truth-based AI that balances from, there is a check between what you learn from the data versus what is the objective truth. And that integration hasn't been done. And that's why I call it an Axiom AI. It's not yet ready for preview, but that's something I'm working on. And I'm like, okay, the world needs to see a better option,
Okay. Well, just as a biblical example might be the 10 commandments in the Hebrew Bible and Jesus' 2 love commandments, love God. And in a sense, these are, might say, axiomatic morality. Isn't that sort of what you're trying to get at? And I'm quite intrigued by when you read the Old Testament stories. For example, the story of
well, Paul, can we move on? I think
why don't you
we've got to know. We do have people waiting here. You've been on here a while, so
sure,
Ken has his hand raised next, and Andy Quick, I think you got something in the chat. If you wanted to raise that, we'll take you next. But Ken, go ahead.
Just very quickly, this is a comment in that, Joanne, you talked about integrating prayer in your patents.
Yes.
I have a petroleum engineering Christian brother friend here in Tulsa who has about, I don't know, many patents. I can't remember his number, but when I met him and he talked about them, he said exactly what you did. That is, he's prayed through all of his engineering capacities, and really does attribute those. And there's a passage in scripture somewhere that he quotes. And maybe it's the same one that you quoted. I don't remember. But anyway, you're not alone in that patent comments about your faith finding patents.
Thank you. I quote 333, Jeremiah 333.
Okay. All right. Andy, quick.
I was just wondering whether you think this open letter from scientists asking companies to pause the development of AI is a good way to proceed, or is that a fear-based thing? Like it seems like the main concern is using AI responsibly. Like I don't think God wants us to not learn and not do research, but is there a problem with that could be solved by pausing the development of AI, as that open letter says? I just wondered what your view of that is.
Okay, so one of my biggest disappointment is a lot of the fear-induced statements were made by the AI scientists themselves, which I'm very disappointed. As I pointed out, Sam Altman, say, "Oh, the world is going to be burned down," the day after he, issued or released the ChatGPT in beta. It's like you created a problem. Like if the human race is being burned down, it's because of people like you. You should do better. Now, the way I respond to the open letter is this: while objectively it is right to take a pause, is just a temporary stopgap, right? Now, the statement was signed by a lot of the major corporations as individuals. There's a lot of conflict of interest, okay? So let me point out the conflict of interest. So number one, okay, OpenAI did not compare fairly because they used dirty data to increase the volume to build the model, okay? Companies like IBM would not compete there because number one, we would not violate our users' data, right? IBM as an enterprise, the data belong to our customer. These are enterprise data. IBM cannot get their data to get the kind of size in data volume to accelerate AI progress. But because OpenAI didn't care, it just grabbed the internet data that are completely unclean, right? Because I explained in the talk that a lot of the headlines were to get you to click. So those headlines are not trustworthy, right? And so the open letter was trying to put a pause in order to balance out the competition of who is the first. And it's a fair game, right? Because we need to agree on the ground rules, because you cannot cut corners to be fast, right? Like other company like IBM could have been in that competition of a ChatGPT-like solution, but we didn't do it, or IBM didn't do it, because A, we don't violate our customers' right for their data, and therefore we don't have that data size. And B, we only use clean data, which is a lot harder to get. And if you violate and cut this corner, of course you'll be fast. And the pause is to hopefully get the government catch up in speed to legislate safe AI by reintroducing the AI product liability back into the game, right? Now, I give you one very, very concrete example. I think 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, IBM Canada acquired a company called Algorithmic. Algorithmic is known to be a financial AI predictor. Because Canada is heavily regulated in our financial market. So there are rules that IBM, which is really academic because we acquire them, must disclose all our data sources, must disclose all our algorithm, and must disclose the confidence level according to our product test. And if we make these three things clear to whoever using it, and if our customer lose money in their investment because of the recommendation, they cannot sue IBM. But if they lose money, if our customer lose money, but they somehow found one of the things that we violate, then IBM is liable for their loss, right? So, but this is only apply in financial application of the AI technology, but it should be applied the same, whether it is health recommendation or any other recommendation. It should be the same. Like the fact that ChatGPT unguarded just released such a thing to a user is not acceptable at all. Just like you don't release the driverless car untested to the world. And so the pause is more of a, okay, let's everyone agree on the rule of the game in this competition of who is the first AGI. It's kind of like that. But I'm hoping that the pause is also a wake-up call for government to catch up in their legislation to prevent AI product releasing in the hands of the public that cause harm. Whether it is driverless car, whether it is financial investment, whether it is health advice, whether it is whatever other kind of advice that are being applied.
Okay. Very good. Anything else? We're a little past our time frame, but I don't want to cut anyone short. We've got anything going on? So, you're just a lot to digest here in what you've given us. I enjoyed hearing the lecture a second time and going over
Randy?
Yes, who is it? I don't hear anyone.
That's John Wood.
John, you got something to say.
I'm going to come back on this. This is a very interesting point you made here at the end, Joanna. I think this is a bigger problem across sectors. And we're looking at these sector by sector, and maybe we need to be looking at it more holistically. As I'm thinking about the new currencies, the cryptocurrencies, and how quickly that took over, and there were many of us just sat back and said, "Wait a minute, this is going to be a disaster." Well, guess what? It has been a disaster, and people are trying to catch up with that. I'm reminded that ASA belongs to the Evangelical Council of Financial Accountability. And about 2 years ago, I saw them very quickly talking about cryptocurrency in churches, and they were encouraging churches to be accepting cryptocurrency as a donation. And I thought immediately, wait a minute, this is way too new and too risky to be just diving into it. And as your analogy to self-driving cars, Del Kuhn's question about the military applications, where you have these questions of autonomous drones making decisions to fire missiles or not, and that is a live question. I think there's a whole series of related questions, and then I'll go to academia, where the questions about essays and the capacity to write or not write. There's a whole series of these things that we need a sort of a richer conversation. And I tie back to what you have done here. I think you've asked us with this divine wisdom greater than AI. That's a kind of catchy phrase that of something that visual and something people can get their head around and say, wait a minute, we need to stop and think about this in a holistic way, because it's impacting us, whether it's our medicine, whether it's our insurance companies, whether it's our financial stuff. I mean, this is permeating almost every sector of society. think there's a very large question here that Christians need to step forward on and be speaking into. And you did so well by, I think, changing the question. And that seems to me to be the biblical model. Jesus just comes in all the time and changes the question. He said, you asked this, but what about this? And so thank you for that.
I think we don't talk enough about how to make AI an ally to do good.
Yeah.
Completely underrepresented. And because of the fear of ASI, it totally robbed us from that opportunity. There is a tremendous opportunity for using AI as humans' ally and do so much.
Right. Yeah, the stimulation of our imaginations here is really helpful. Right. A redemptive imagination can really help us here. So,
So I do like your slide there on the explainability at each stage here, and kind of requiring, that the AI systems certainly open up so we can discover what the sources are. And I think from what I've seen, and now I have not been that active in ChatGPT. I've just been hearing things, but it's very clear that once you know the limitations of the data set that has been used for the training of the particular one that you're using, you can start to understand why it's making so many errors, and where it's really good and where it's not good. And so I like your proposal of requiring that kind of explainability at every stage.
Yes, because legislation means nothing if you cannot audit. Right? You can legislate, thou shalt not drive more faster than 60 miles an hour, but it means nothing until you have a speedometer, whether it's in your car or for the police, right? So explainable AI is for that, because without that, you cannot see. So as of today, ChatGPT still refuses to disclose their data source. Right. What is there to hide? It makes you wonder, right? Like black box is not good. And I also use a concrete example of IBM solutions through algorithmics. We cannot sell our solution if we do not disclose where we get our data to project the investment model.
Right.
That transparency is legislated, and we need to do that.
Right. Okay, any more questions? If not, would you like to make a closing summary statement, Joanna, or have you said enough?
Okay. I think for this community, which is Christian scientists, it is a golden opportunity because in this era of chaos in AI, I want the world to know of the church, especially Christian scientists, as someone who turned the tide, who debunked the deception, who shows a role model of how AI can be steered towards good as a testimony of the gospel. And that's my last comment.
Okay. And with that, Joanna, I thank you very much for an excellent program and for all of your work. And I know I speak on behalf of everyone. And farewell, everyone.